it was. I'm sure if you looked at the bracket there as we had it up, a lot of really big name players on there. Aaron Zhang, Wolf Glick, Angel Miranda, just to name a few. Getting through just that top 8, let alone all the great players that were in Day 2 Swiss, is really an impressive accomplishment, and we should be seeing some fantastic matches now.
Yeah, definitely. We have a grudge match on our hands for today. Of course, Toler Webb, formerly a world champion, will be representing the United States of America here on 4th of July weekend, while Raphael Bagara, sort of a young upstart ready to make an impact here, going to be representing the nation of Canada, which has also been celebrating its holiday a little bit earlier as well. Canada Day started off the week.
Yeah, but a little bit embarrassing to drop a tournament in the senior division for the United States. Usually we don't get that international element until Worlds, but it's starting early here, and hopefully America maybe can make it 1-1.
Yeah, and you can see Raphael representing Canada on your screen here. 2015 accomplishments include a top 16 at the regionals and now a finals position at nationals. So definitely going to be looking to make a little bit more of a name for himself on the big stage today. Fill out that accomplishment sheet a little bit more. His team, Gardevoir, Amoonguss, Scrafty, Heatran, Landorus, and Thundurus. Some Pokemon that we've seen quite a bit of, and shares quite a bit with his opponent as well.
Yeah, there's 4 Pokemon in common between the two players, which might make this a little bit challenging to keep track of. If you're watching the stream on Pokemon.com/nationals, you can actually check the newsfeed below, and there'll be a link you can find to the top 8 teams from the Masters Division here. So open that up on your second monitor if you have one, and help follow along. And if you don't have a second monitor, I hope that your dial-up internet is able to make it through this match, because it's going to be a great one.
All right, and our other competitor is the former world champion in the seniors division, Toler Webb, representing the United States of America. A little bit of a home field advantage, as you might be able to hear over the microphones here. Of course, his accomplishment sheet's a little bit more filled out. Top 16 in Worlds in 2013, and of course he was the world champion in 2012, where he also went 3rd place at Nationals. So trying to make another name for himself here, add national champion to his resume. We saw a former world champion take the national crown in the TCG earlier. Let's see if Toler can add that to his resume as well.
Yeah, that's something that just hasn't happened in the video game. For whatever reason, the world champion just seemed to struggle here at the national championship. I think the closest we ever got was Wolf Glick won nationals and made it all the way to 2nd at the world championships. But there's some sort of curse here that I guess Toler's going to have to try to break. I think one thing really cool going into this match, there's 4 Pokemon in common between the two players, Gardevoir, Amoonguss, Landorus, and Thundurus, but they're both running 3 of those Pokemon appreciably differently. Both the players have had the chance to look at each other's teams, so they'll know about some of those differences, but it should make a big difference in this match, where even though it's a mirror match in Pokemon for several of the cases here, the way they're going to be able to use them is going to be very different.
Yeah, and if you want to comment on the battles as you're seeing on your screen there, use that hashtag #PlayPokemon to add to the conversation. I as well am starting to lose my voice a little bit. I couldn't help myself during the senior and junior division finals and the trading card game. I know it was probably bad for me. I might sound a little bit huskier than usual, but I just couldn't resist it. All right, and speaking of not being able to resist it, let's go down to the main stage so we can start getting into our first game of this, the finals of the 2015 Pokemon Video Game National Championships. Take it away, Justin.
Thank you so much, Evan. I am joined on stage by your 2 finalists. I cannot believe it. I am so excited right now. 2 incredible competitors. I believe you already know some of their accolades, but I believe we got 2 guys representing for their home countries here. Why don't we, it looks like you might have a cape on or something. What am I seeing over here, Raphael?
I'm ready to take the title to the Great White North. Canada!
Woo! Oh, that hype train is coming in for Canada. All right, what do you think about that?
I think that we should probably keep the title somewhere where it won't freeze.
Woo! It is heating up over here. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm not going to delay the championship match any further. These are your 2 masters. We're going to go back to our commentators. I'm on cloud 9 like a Psyduck. This is getting crazy. I'll see you guys in just a sec with a championship match.
Yeah, I wish I could be oblivious to some of those puns, but sometimes you're just not that lucky. Toler is exactly right. We don't want the championship to be cold, so both of these players hoping to get all of this momentum leading into Worlds, and there is nothing better going into Worlds than taking home a national championships.
Definitely is, and hey, some of the fun of this is, it's good practice for Worlds. Both these players easily going to not just make it to the World Championships, but also start on Day 2 with that travel award. So, what better way to get in there than proving you're a national champion, one of very few.
Very much going to be important for both of these players. Let's go right into team preview. Game 1, Toler Webb versus Raphael Bagara. USA versus Canada. Game 1 of this best-of-3 set. Toler will be on the top of your screen, so we will be looking at it from Raphael's perspective. Toler, we saw him yesterday running Landorus, the Amoonguss, Politoed, Aegislash, Gardevoir, Thundurus, and Raphael will be running a Gardevoir, Amoonguss, Heatran, Scrafty, Landorus, and Thundurus. So as you mentioned a little bit before, a lot of common Pokemon here, but some very important techs.
Yeah, some very important differences. Raphael, for instance, he's kind of running that Gardevoir Trick Room archetype that we've seen a decent bit of coming into this tournament. On the other hand, Toler's got Hidden Power on his Gardevoir, so a little bit more offensive and a little bit quicker, most likely. The Thundurus on Toler's side has Hidden Power, but the Thundurus on Raphael's side actually has both Swagger and Taunt, so that Hidden Power won't be available to hit the Landorus on Toler's side.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what these players can adjust to against these two teams. We're heading right into the game. Toler on the top of your screen. Let me hear you if you want to hear Toler win. And on the bottom half of your screen, that's Raphael Bagara, that's Landorus and Thundurus. Is Canada in the house today? All right, a little bit of a home field advantage for Toler, but there are some Canadians here backing Raphael, so double Genies for Raphael, and then one Genie and the Rain for Toler.
Yeah, Politoed, one of the Pokemon that is different between these two teams. Politoed can do pretty well against Landorus, not quite as well against Thundurus, though. As Raphael will likely remember from checking on Toler's team, does have that Wakan Berry, so single Thunderbolt definitely not going to knock it out. Depending on how bulky the Politoed winds up being and how the Thundurus is trained, it might actually take 3, so not quite the type advantage you might be hoping for. However, unlike most Game 1s, he knows this information coming in, so this might feel a little bit more like a second or third game in the series.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if these players can make those adaptations. Thundurus taunting on Toler's side, doesn't want Raphael's Thundurus to get any motivation or any momentum on the side. Earthquake from Raphael, going to try and just deal some damage to that Politoed, most likely trying to go for a quick KO on it. Thunderbolt onto the Politoed, activates the Wackenberry, so not going to be able to pick up the KO here unless he gets a critical hit. Not quite, down to a red HP. Dealing good damage there, so Politoed going to hang on with just a sliver of health and get a Scald back on Landorus. 5 HP, but the burn! And Toler is excited about that. That's going to be a KO on that Landorus thanks to the burn.
Yeah, Landorus just barely goes down there. It seemed like that was going to be a positive trade for Raphael. Even though neither set was going to get the knockout there without that Scald burn. It's an advantage when you've got the faster Pokemon in that situation, but it just doesn't quite work out there. Politoed able to survive because of the Wakan Berry. For a second, I thought that maybe Raphael had just forgotten that it was there, but I think it still would have been a good trade. Unfortunately, Landorus just not quite able to hang on there.
Yeah, Gardevoir now out on the field for Raphael. We did already see the taunt coming out from Toler's Thundurus, though. So if Raphael wants to get the Trick Room up, he's either going to have to make some hard reads or get that Thundurus off the field.
That he is, and I think one thing both players are probably going to be looking to learn here is which Thundurus is quicker. That information isn't available to them yet, so big deal, especially when both of them have taunt.
And Raphael's Thundurus, previously taunted, has to switch out so he can come back in at a later date. Heatran now on the field, but Heatran, even though it's kind of a frog, does not like the rain, being that fire typing. Gardevoir Mega evolving right away, puts on its Sunday best for this Championship Sunday. Politoed protecting itself as well, just trying to make sure that it survives another turn. And Thundurus, using that Thunder Wave, wants to make sure that it has a chance of restricting the attacking ability of one of Raphael's Pokemon. Gardevoir is paralyzed, and it's fully paralyzed, so not able to get off any attacks. And really good turn for Toler there, but you have to worry about having a paralyzed Gardevoir if you know that it has Trick Room.
Yeah, that option is definitely available. If he's afraid enough of it, taunt is a good way to stop it, but that'll definitely come at a cost. I think Politoed clearly protecting there to try to avoid having to deal with a Hyper Voice, and if he does go for that taunt, it takes a Hyper Voice in return. It kind of erases the advantage he got in the last turn. Also, we see Heatran joining the field. On teams like Raphael's, we tend to either see it with safety goggles to help deal with enemy Amoonguss, which should be helpful here since Toler has one, or Life Orb. This Heatran is the Life Orb variant, so it's going to do big damage if it gets some attacks off.
Well, hopefully it can deal that big damage even in the rain. Politoed switches out for the Aegislash. Usually not something you want to switch into a Heatran, but with the rain up, going to be a little bit more protected. Thunder Wave again from Toler's Thundurus, going to paralyze the Heatran. Heatran gets the Earth Power up onto the Aegislash slot. going to deal good damage to that, not worrying about the rain at all. Super effective, about half of its HP. Of course, you see that Life Orb recoil is the reason why Raphael was able to deal so much damage. Hyper Voice from Mega Gardevoir dealing more damage to both of Toler's Pokemon, just enough to activate that Citrus Berry on Toler's Thundurus. So getting that item out of the way can be huge for making sure that Thundurus is unable to disrupt the rest of the team.
It can, Thundurus only going to be able to take a couple more attacks. Fortunately, avoiding that Hyper Voice earlier with the power of Paralysis, which will allow it to take one more. And Paralysis is going to be a big deal here. Gardevoir opting to go for on the offense instead of using Trick Room. So Aegislash, a relatively slow Pokemon, it's going to be quicker than either of these. Should be able to easily take out that Gardevoir if it has the opportunity to. So definitely going to cause some caution in Raphael here.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of caution for Raphael, but Toler is also playing cautiously, protecting his Aegislash with that King Shield. But Gardevoir also going to protect itself, going through the Paralysis. Thunderbolt from Thundurus onto Heatran, going to deal damage. We'll have to see if Heatran's going to be able to get off any damage as well. Heat Wave into the King Shield and going to connect with the Thundurus, but of course in that rain, not going to deal that much, but actually a critical hit. Plus that Life Orb making sure that Thundurus still feels that one.
Thundurus didn't enjoy that very much at all. Usually a Pokemon that's trained to take special attacks very well, and the rain's up, and it still just chucked it.
Yeah.
However, Heatran also chucking itself a little bit with that Life Orb recoil. Has to worry about Thundurus knocking out with a Thunderbolt, and a great read by Toler using that King Shield. It might not seem like one since Aegislash wasn't targeted by anything other than that Heat Wave, but staying in shield form like that allows this turn to be a little bit safer for him, and he couldn't get that big KO last turn because Gardevoir was going to protect itself anyway. A good read knowing that Gardevoir was going to play it safe.
The Aegislash is going to continue to play it safe as well with Wide Guard on his team. Thunderbolt onto the Heatran, going to see if he can pick up that KO. Yes, Heatran will go down. Toler's Thundurus just able to deal enough damage, and Gardevoir is paralyzed again. So Raphael not going to be able to get off any damage that turn and just takes the feint onto Heatran. So unfortunate loss of a Pokemon there and another full paralysis.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Gardevoir may have been using Hyper Voice anyway. Certainly that's what Toler was expecting as the wide guard keys there. But either way, Toler's got a 4-2 advantage now. The Thundurus coming back in fully healthy. Taunt, Thunderbolt could both be very helpful here. Taunt and that Aegislash would make things a little bit more tricky for it. Make it harder for it to dance with this Gardevoir. But Thundurus not likely to let that happen. And both sides probably wanting the information this turn of which Thundurus is quicker moving into game 2. So regardless of what happens here, it might not be the worst thing in the world for either player. Big part of these mirrors between the two Thundurus is realizing, if I'm slower, I have to Thunderbolt him from rid of the taunt, and it's kind of getting that idea on the floor.
Or, of course, if they're the same speed, you have to win that coin flip.
Yeah, the best thing to do, right? Just make things a little bit more of a toss-up, which will be a big advantage for whichever player wins game 1, if so. And when you have to play through those coin flips over the course of a series, you didn't expect them to go about even, right? Thus a coin flip, so winning the first one's a big deal.
Well, Toler is going to take a Thunderbolt. Thundurus moving first for Raphael. Thunderbolt not enough onto the Aegislash. The Thunderbolt from Toler's Thundurus onto Gardevoir going to connect. Aegislash switching over to its Blade form on the offensive. Most likely going to try and get that Gardevoir down. Shadow Ball comes out onto Gardevoir. The handshake across the table. Easy KO onto Gardevoir. Raphael dropping this first set as it's just his Thundurus against the Sword and Shield and the Thunder Genie.
And the two pals in the back as well. Toler likely not going to get the clean 4-0 sweep here, but I'd assume we'll probably see a forfeit and a really dominant Game 1 victory by Toler.
Yeah, very dominant from Toler. Not quite 4-0, but still very much in control the entire game. Of course, Raphael may have gotten enough information about some of those speed tiers that you mentioned before. Toler going with the taunt again onto Raphael's Thundurus. Probably wasn't going to try and do anything but attack this turn anyway. The only way for Raphael to get back into it would be to knock out some Pokemon. Gets the knockout onto Toler's Thundurus, but Aegislash with its own Shadow Ball, of course, deals so much damage to these Pokemon. Thundurus really bulky, though, able to tank that pretty easily.
Yeah, both sides learning a little bit about how much damage Aegislash is going to do, which I think was also actually key to the turn where Gardevoir was knocked out. We saw the Thunderbolt and the Shadow Ball targeting it. Toler definitely assuming that he wasn't going to be able to pick up that knockout with just a super effective Shadow Ball. Some of the Aegislash we've seen this weekend throughout the top cuts in all 3 age divisions, actually. I've seen a lot of Life Orb Aegislash, players choosing to go a higher damage route, where Toler's been a little bit more defensive with his, even though it's a quicker Aegislash. He's going with leftovers, and that takes your damage down a little bit. So you need a partner to help out and pick up those big knockouts sometimes.
Well, one of those partners could be Mega Gardevoir, as Toler finally switches that in, shows that Gardevoir is his Mega that he chose to bring. So Thunderbolt from Raphael, going to deal good damage to that Blade form Aegislash. We'll pick up that KO, so a respectable 2-1 lead for Toler now. Hyper Voice from Gardevoir dealing full damage to Thundurus, though, as the only target on the field. A critical hit, just gravy on top of that one. Picks up the KO, and that's going to mean game 1 for Toler Webb and America.
And America, indeed. Crowd mostly on their feet after that one for a nice victory by Toler, and he's a game away now from becoming both the national and the world champion for, I think, what is definitely the first time, at least for the seniors and masters division.
Yeah, definitely an interesting position to be in. 1 game away now from the national championships. Of course, Toler knows this pressure. He won the world championships, so we'll have to see if he can keep his composure as we head straight into game 2. Toler Webb only needs 1 more game to take home the title. Raphael needs to win 2 straight in order to bring this home to Canada. So we're going to hop straight into game 2. Toler, again, on the top of your screen. Raphael on the bottom. And the end score was 2-0, but Toler was 100% in control of that game.
Yeah, he was. I think Raphael's going to need to look to switch things up a little bit in this one. One thing, too, that was interesting is we mentioned how similar the teams were with 4 Pokemon in common. Toler chose to bring both of the Pokemon he has that Raphael doesn't, both that Palitoad and the Aegislash. Both of them made a pretty big difference there. The Steel type that Raphael chose, Heatran, had a pretty big impact in the game as well, but Palitoad existing certainly makes things more difficult.
Still had an impact through the rain,
That it did, yeah. And neither side actually choosing their Amoonguss, which is something that'll probably be a theme throughout this series, with the opposing Mega being Gardevoir. Unless one of them are anticipating it not being selected by the other side, Amoonguss going to have a hard time getting things done here.
All right, time for game 2. Both competitors have selected their Pokemon, and we are headed into turn 1 of game 2. Again, Toler Webb on the top of your screen, representing America, up against Raphael on the bottom half of your screen, representing Canada. Toler actually chooses to bring his Amoonguss this time along with his Landorus. Raphael choosing to go with the Gardevoir and Scrafty leads. So this is pretty much telegraphed. I want to put up Trick Room.
That it is, and Amoonguss is a great Pokemon to discourage that plan. We see that Trace getting intimidated, so Landorus is going to have a very difficult time accomplishing anything this turn, but this is a fun matchup in this first turn here. Typically you might like to just get this Trick Room up. You could fake out the Amoonguss and Trick Room and feel like you're not in too much trouble, but the question then is, well, then what do you do? One of the weaknesses of Raphael's team in this situation is that since he chose that Life Orb Heatran we saw doing all that damage in that first game, it doesn't instead of Safety Goggles, so he doesn't have a Pokemon he can just switch into a Spore other than his own Amoonguss if he chose to bring it, and that really doesn't help him take advantage of the Trick Room very much with another Amoonguss on the other side of the field.
Yeah, the Amoonguss is one of the most common techs we see against Trick Room for precisely that reason. Raphael decides to make a change on the fly, does not want to set up Trick Room, switches out his Gardevoir in favor of Thundurus instead. Amoonguss will protect Landorus, U-turning out, just wants to scout out and deal a little bit of damage. Actually deals quite a bit of damage to that Thundurus. A critical hit with that U-turn. Toler switching back. That Landorus will be able to now see both of the Pokemon that Raphael wants out on the field. Knows that Scrafty still is yet to move. Switches his Landorus out in favor of Gardevoir. Now Gardevoir on the field for Toler. Scrafty using knockoff onto the Gardevoir. It's going to be able to deal some damage to Gardevoir, but unfortunately that Mega Gardevoir likes to hold on to its stone.
Yeah, it's one of the quirks of Mega Stones that you can't knock them off, so that U-turn being very smart. Gardevoir also great against both of these Pokemon, and Amoonguss in favorable position now too. It protects to avoid anything happening to it, such as losing its item last turn, which is important because its item, unlike Raphael's Amoonguss, which has Rocky Helmet, is Mental Herb, which is going to be a big problem if Thundurus goes for the taunt here, which is sort of the obvious play.
Well, we'll have to see if Raphael went with the obvious play. Instead, he switched out Scrafty in favor of Heatran. Heatran pairing up pretty nicely against both this Gardevoir and the Amoonguss. And with no rain on the field just yet, that might be what Raphael needs to get back in the game here. Toler's Gardevoir will go ahead and immediately Mega Evolve Swagger from Thundurus onto that Amoonguss. But as you mentioned, the attack will rise sharply, will become confused. The Mental Herb on there not going to be able to protect against from the confusion. So damage onto both the Thundurus and the Heatran. Thundurus healing up a little bit more with Citrus. Amoonguss now rolling the dice, seeing if it will be able to get off an attack this turn. Confused, gets the Spore off. Who will it target? Targets down to Thundurus. So Thundurus now sleeping. Amoonguss still confused. Heatran now out on the field though.
Yeah, a very interesting situation here, too. Actually, really the only bit of information about these teams that wasn't revealed was the type of Gardevoir's hidden power. Most people would probably expect it to be ground type. I've been told it's not. I think Raphael has figured this out. I've heard Toler thought he had the information at the very least, but if not, Heatran might have to play a little bit scared here.
Well, Toler is definitely going to play more conservatively. Had that Politoed in the back, the perfect switch in for this Heatran. Now going to also protect that Amoonguss with the Drizzle. So Heatran's fire type attacks not going to be able to deal as much damage as Raphael might want. Heatran instead just going to protect, wants to burn some turns here while Thunderous is sleeping, trying to get it to wake up so that it can start interacting with this battle again. Confused Amoonguss. Going to hit itself in its own confusion, but most likely not going to be able to get much anything done that turn anyway.
Yeah, I think it's very likely it's Spore into a Protect, so, sometimes even when you hit yourself in confusion, not the worst thing in the world, just losing a little bit of health for it. Politoed coming back in is a big deal here. We saw how well it was able to deal with that Thunderous last game, in spite of it being an Electric-type Pokemon, thanks to its item, and getting that Rain on the field, and the threat of Scald is really going to help with Heatran as well.
Speaking of things that can help with that Thunderbolt, Amoonguss trying to go for maybe a Rage Powder there, but hits itself in its own confusion, but Thunderous is still sleeping. Raphael not going to be able to get off any damage this turn from the Thunderous. Heat Wave comes out from the Heatran, dealing a lot of damage to the Amoonguss again, and a little bit of damage to the Politoed. That Heatran, it doesn't care about the rain because it can just get critical hits all day, every day. Ice Beam from Politoed onto Thunderous. Will it be able to survive? No, Thunderous will go down to that Ice Beam from the Politoed. So now, Politoed and that Amoonguss out on the field against Heatran, and Raphael needs to make a switch in here. It will be the Gardevoir going to be able to put out a lot of pressure against that Politoed offensively, and also that Amoonguss is now a little bit low that it probably wants to get off the field.
And that it does. Usually the Regenerator ability allows it to heal up. So even though Amoonguss is low at health, it can definitely come back later and take a hit. The cost of that's going to be pretty high, however. A Mega Gardevoir getting in for free on a knockout there, able to threaten Mega Evolution and Hyper Voice now to do pretty big chunks of damage. However, doing that leaves Heatran exposed, so unless Raphael thinks that Hyper Voice and one of Heatran's attacks, thanks to that Life Orb, will be able to knock out Politoed. He's got to be very careful here. Certainly doesn't want to give up Heatran for free and end up in a situation where this is even, 3-2 at this point. Already down 1-0 in the series. Falling behind too quickly here could take away his chance at stealing that United States National Championship and bringing it back up to Canada.
Yeah, it's going to be rough for Raphael. Gardevoir, Heatran. You can see that Raphael is taking every moment he has. Amoonguss will switch out, going to heal himself up a little bit with that Regenerator ability. Lander is now out on the field. It's a strong Pokemon against both the Gardevoir and the Heatran, but not so much if it's under a Trick Room. Heatran's attack and Gardevoir is both going to drop because of the Intimidate. Mega Gardevoir showing up for Raphael now. So Mega Gardevoir on the field, going to try and deal as much damage as possible potentially here. Politoed protecting. So just trying to get that Landorus in for free here. No damage coming out. Heatran's Flash Cannon into Politoed's Protect. Hyper Voice from Gardevoir. Not going to deal damage to Politoed, but will deal damage to that Landorus. So a good amount of damage to Landorus, but now that Landorus is out on the field and there's no Trick Room, it can basically, run over this game.
Yeah, or can it? One thing about this Landorus, both of these Landorus, actually, both of them, we normally see that Choice Scarf Landorus. Neither of these are. They're both actually jolly-natured, choice-banned Landorus. One of the problems with that, of course, not as quick as the normal Landorus, depending on how Toler's Gardevoir is trained and how Raphael's as well. They can't necessarily be sure that their Landorus will go before the Gardevoir here.
Well, we'll have to see which Pokemon goes first. Heatran will protect, does not want to take any damage. Landorus's U-turn goes first. U-turn onto Gardevoir, that is choice band Landorus, but not going to be able to deal enough to that Gardevoir. So Gardevoir still on the field. Politoed needs to deal damage to that Gardevoir, or else it will be suffering another Hyper Voice, or potentially letting that Trick Room come up. In case Trick Room comes up, Toler switches in Amoonguss. Hyper Voice from the Gardevoir onto Politoed and Amoonguss. Not very effective, but deals good damage to Politoed. Scald from the Politoed onto Gardevoir. Doesn't pick up the KO. 14 health. Gardevoir is still around on the field here. And now Heatran and Gardevoir up against Amoonguss and Politoed. You have to feel a lot better about this position than the last turn.
Yeah, that you definitely do, but that Scald not quite able to pick up the burn and the knockout on Gardevoir. The damage from Landorus is really nice, though. We see the Choice Band putting out significantly more damage than for the traditional Landorus we see. And later in the game, we'll be able to come in and Earthquake. There's still that issue for Rafa. He's got to keep playing this game in a way that gives him a chance to win. Gardevoir is very weakened. Heatran is Heatran. And Scrafty, the only remaining Pokemon, that Intimidate is going to be very important. He's going to have to try to find ways to get it in and out safely here, I think. It's important not to just allow it to hang out in the back and then get brought in where it can only fake out once, loses access to switching and keeping recycling that in the Intimidate.
Well, it looks like Toler is going to protect his Amoonguss, thinks that that mushroom is going to be crucial to the win here. Amoonguss avoids the flash cannon with that protect. Hyper Voice from Gardevoir will be able to KO that Politoed. A critical hit as well. A lot of crits in these games so far, but Amoonguss still around. Rain does stop, so now Heatran does not have to worry about the rain, but again, no Trick Room up. Gardevoir is the choice for Toler.
That it is, and I guess that's one of the problems with Landorus here. He'd like to bring it in and just click Earthquake, but doing so would cause Toler to knock out his own Amoonguss, or I guess he could switch in Gardevoir and start knocking that out instead. Either way, not a very good situation. So Landorus gonna have to save its talents for later, and Amoonguss gonna try to protect this Gardevoir to get some damage out.
Well, it's going to try and protect the Gardevoir with that Rage Powder. Heatran's Flash Cannon again will be redirected onto Amoonguss, deals damage, gets the KO onto Amoonguss. So Amoonguss now down for Toler. If Raphael could get up a Trick Room here, it would be huge, but instead goes for the Psy Shock onto Gardevoir. Knows that Mega Gardevoir on Raphael's side just needs to get damage before it goes down to this Hyper Voice. So Gardevoir failing to that Hyper Voice. Heatran taking a little bit of damage, but again, now we're in a position where we have that Choice Band Landorus out on the field, and I believe that was Scrafty in the back for Raphael.
Yeah, can only fake out one Pokemon here. Hyper Voice from Gardevoir can knock out Scrafty. Superpower or Earthquake from Landorus can knock out Heatran. It's only going to come down to the speeds here. The Choice Scarf Landorus would probably make this situation a little bit easier, but without that, anything could definitely happen here. Also, still using a Choice item, not able to protect, so it's a pretty safe fake out if if Raphael wants to go for it, rather. And it's really up to him to make this play. Toler only really has the option of whether or not to protect Gardevoir or go for that Hyper Voice, but there's two Pokemon you could potentially fake out here, depending on what you're afraid of. Landorus seems like the more likely choice.
Yep, Raphael goes with that more likely choice, a critical hit. This game is in critical condition for Raphael. He needs it. Heat Wave from Heatran goes first. We'll pick up the KO on that Landorus. Gardevoir stays on just a little bit, but gets burnt as it takes that damage, and its partner Landorus falls on the field. Heatran taking that Life Orb damage. Hyper Voice coming out from the Gardevoir will deal a lot of damage. A one-hit KO onto Scrafty, but Heatran is still around, and that Gardevoir burnt now. Raphael, he's bringing it back to Canada here. A Game 3 for us in Indianapolis.
And that's what we want, right? An impressively played game from Raphael there. For most of that game, it looked like he was losing, but he saved the right Pokemon. That's what matters sometimes, right? You keep your Pokemon that you need to finish the game safely. It's tough to play with Scrafty in this matchup. A single Hyper Voice for that Mega Gardevoir is just going to take it out of the battle. So you've got to be very conservative about bringing it in. You can't cycle it the way you might like to sometimes. He finds the right opportunity to have it available to fake out. Very important to get that game to 2-2 there, and I think that's going to be another key going into Game 3 here. With all there's choice Pokemon, there's that fake out from Scrafty, the threat of Trick Room still, getting down to 2 Pokemon remaining like that and removing the switching options is going to be very important. More than some other games, important to get those KOs and start reducing the options of your opponent with this matchup.
Yeah, real important to make those choices and get those options off the table for your opponent. Let's go straight to Game 3, the deciding match here in Indianapolis. The winner of this game will become your new national champion. Raphael on the bottom part of your screen, Toler will be on the top. What an amazing set so far. We've seen both of these teams very similar, but the Pokemon that they don't have in common are the ones that have been coming up big.
That they have. And the Pokemon that hasn't been coming up big is Landorus. I believe it's rocking a big 0-2 in this series. So maybe a Pokemon that both sides will consider either not selecting or thinking their opponent will expect them not to select after the Pokemon selection they made in their losing games.
Yeah, and the Pokemon that has come up huge for Toler is Politoed, out on the field immediately alongside Gardevoir, and Raphael with his own Gardevoir and Heatran. And if I had to choose my Gardevoir partners in this case, probably Politoed.
Yeah, Water-type Pokemon, pretty good against Fire-type Pokemon, as
Funny
it turns
how that
out.
works out.
Yeah, I mean, the type chart is a thing. However, it's not quite as simple as it looks here. I think the combination of Gardevoir and Politoed are going to have a hard time getting a one-hit KO on this Gardevoir. So if Raphael does want to finally bust out that Trick Room and his Pokemon in the back that he can pull it off with, the option is there this time. However, if not, certainly the type chart being a thing makes the situation a little bit complicated, and Politoed is a tough Pokemon to switch into for the most part for Raphael. Other than Amoonguss, there's really not much that can switch in safely, and even then you have to look out for an Ice Beam. Cool to see Politoed, period, by the way. We very rarely see it when it's not paired with something like Ludicolo or Kingdra with Swift Swim, but clearly working pretty well here as Toler is a game away from becoming the national champion.
Yeah, both players are now a game away from becoming the national champion. So this first turn, you can see both players thinking over their moves for the entirety of their allotted time. Gardevoir retreats for Toler, doesn't want to stick around and take a flash cannon from Heatran. Aegislash now back on the field for Toler. That Pokemon was missing last game, and it looks like Toler decided that he missed it quite a bit. Raphael will Mega Evolve his own Gardevoir. It doesn't need to run away from anything. Politoed's protecting Mega Gardevoir, and Heatran then will now be able to deal damage to any Pokemon. And Earth Power again catches the Aegislash switch in. Again, about 50% HP taken by that Aegislash from that Life Orb Heatran. Hyper Voice from Mega Gardevoir. Going to deal some good damage as well to that Aegislash. Probably in range for, before the leftovers, would have been in range for a second Hyper Voice, but an amazing read there from Raphael, catching that Aegislash on the switch in.
Yeah, the Canadian delegation really enjoyed that one, and Aegislash just healthy enough now that, as you mentioned, a Hyper Voice probably can't pick it off, though Heatwave would if Heatran wants to have the guts there. Definitely an important Pokemon in this matchup for both players. They're Steel type. The Mega Gardevoir is huge in this matchup. Neither side has really amazing solutions to it, other than their Steel type Pokemon. Both of them using Flash Cannon, even though for Heatran that's pretty irregular. And the Heatran on Raphael's side being healthy, the Aegislash and Toler's being so weakened could really change this matchup in the way that Gardevoir gets controlled. Neither side can afford to let it just stand there in Hyper Voice.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the Mega Gardevoir mirror, having your Steel type healthy is probably one of the most important things you can have.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's important to be able to keep the counter to your most important Pokemon on the opposing side alive long enough to take care of what it needs to beat, and Aegislash might not be able to do it.
Well, we'll have to see if Aegislash can do it. Both Steel types this round opting to protect instead of making an attack. Gardevoir just going for another Hyper Voice will only damage the Politoed this time. We've seen that Politoed, very bulky, able to protect itself from a lot of damage. Scald into the Heatran's Protect, so that's just free damage for Raphael. Another great call, making the correct moves, and Aegislash, though, slowly healing up with that leftovers.
Yeah, this is a turn where now it's going to have to be Toler that makes the correct call. That was a couple turns in a row where Raphael won. Politoed now in range to be knocked out by a Hyper Voice. It's possible for Aegislash to try to protect it with Wide Guard, but I think a protected switch is more likely, as we're likely going to see here, because a single target on both Pokemon could also pick up that knockout.
Yep, Aegislash switches out for the Landorus. We'll have to see if Landorus this time can pick up a win. Has not picked up a win yet. Politoed protecting. Raphael going to be able to make more attacking moves here. Earth Power into the Landorus switch in. Psyshock from Gardevoir into the Politoed. Toler needed to make that play. He did, and now he's in a pretty good position.
Yeah, he's definitely in a much better position now. He's got a healthy Pokemon in the field. Politoed could choose to go for a suicidal helping hand if it wants to here to try and get rid of that enemy Gardevoir, which is so important, and that might be something that has to happen here. He has to find ways to get damage on this Gardevoir without using too much of Aegislash's health. It's pretty much done what it can, and we're not too surprised if we only see it at this point to either switch in to protect something else from a knockout, which could happen here even if he's afraid of a target on Politoed, but with Heatran switching, it's a little bit less danger, only really a Hyper Voice likely to come the other way, and more likely a Protect.
Yeah, Raphael trying to protect his Pokemon from an Earthquake. As you mentioned, that helping hand from Politoed, Earthquake from that banded Landorus. Will be able to take out the Politoed. Will it be able to take out the Gardevoir as well? Both Pokemon go down, Politoed and the Mega Gardevoir. Raphael protects his Heatran by switching in that Thundurus, but again, taking out that Mega Pokemon, really big for Toler.
Yeah, that's exactly the play needed. Like I mentioned, he kind of had to find a different way to get rid of that Mega Gardevoir and was able to do it. With that Choice Band and the Helping Hand, more than enough to get the knockout, though. Landorus being locked into Earthquake now and intimidated puts Raphael still probably in the better position, though it's hard to be upset about that one if you're Toler, considering where he was. A little bit surprised to see that play in the previous turn, though. I was kind of expecting to see the opposite play with Thundurus switching in to deal with the Earthquake and Heatran protecting, since Gardevoir had protected on the previous turn and Heatran hadn't. Raphael's sort of paying for it, but sometimes sacrificing Pokemon isn't the worst thing. He's still an advantage in this game. Landorus would really like to switch, but that's going to expose Toler's very important final Pokemon to damage. Aegislash already so weakened. Dangerous turn for Toler.
Well, Toler is going to take the risk and switch out for his Gardevoir again. Now that Aegislash already weakened, will it be able to survive this turn? Aegislash uses King Shield, does not want to take any damage. It's way too low, just wants to heal up a little bit more with those leftovers. Swagger from Thundurus hits the Gardevoir on the switch in. would have been really dangerous to hit that Landorus as well. Gardevoir now confused, knockoff from Scrafty into the Aegislash slot, takes that King Shield debuff now. So Scrafty not going to be able to deal that much damage anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it was going to be doing too much damage anyway. And now with the threat of Hyper Voice coming the other way, it's not too. It's actually relatively likely that it'll just try to knock off Aegislash again. If it gets knocked out, it gets knocked out. A little bit dangerous to do too much else with it, but it keeps Aegislash honest there, and that's sort of a big deal. Raphael's in a better position, so by knockoffing that slot, if Aegislash had chosen to get aggressive and attack instead, which players are likely to do when they're losing, able to avoid any potential surprises and losing control.
Well, it looks like Toler just wanted to reset the choice lock on his Landorus. Landorus coming back in, another Intimidate on that Scrafty. If Scrafty is going to stick around, it's definitely not dealing any damage. Raphael knows that, switches back for that Heatran in the back. Heatran now on the field against the Aegislash and the Landorus. Thundurus using Swagger again, just trying to spread that confusion on Toler's team. Now Aegislash confused, heightened attack. Could be very dangerous if it hits itself in its own confusion. Switches over to the Blade form. Aegislash takes a lot of damage if it hits itself in its own confusion. Will it be able to get the attack off? No, it hits itself in its own confusion. Barely holds on though. Those leftovers really coming up huge. Aegislash down to the red again just because it wanted to go for an attack.
That's a big deal though. If it had been able to hit Heatran, you could have gotten to the point where maybe 2 Rock Slides from Landorus could have knocked it out here and given Toler more options on what move he's going to lock into. He really doesn't want to Earthquake in this situation because it's going to limit his offense with this other Pokemon very significantly. So that's a really tough attack for Toler, especially now because if it King Shields and hits itself in confusion, there's a good chance it's going to knock itself out, and that prevents Landorus from switching moves then with only 2 Pokemon remaining. You mentioned previously how important it is to not be the player who gets down to 2 Pokemon first, and that's definitely going to be the case there, even with this powerful Choice Band Landorus threatening a bunch of damage the other way. With this Thundurus having that swagger we've seen so much of instead of hidden power.
Well, Thundurus switching out for Scrafty. Raphael does not want to let that banded Landorus just deal a lot of damage to his Pokemon. So Aegislash now going to, it looks like, try for the King Shield. It's confused, it hits itself in its own confusion again, and Aegislash knocks itself out. Toler with that Landorus now. Is Landorus going to be able to pick up a KO here? The superpower onto Heatran through the Intimidate. Does pick up the KO. Heatran goes down, and now it's Landorus, Therian, and that Gardevoir in the back against the Scrafty and the Thundurus for Raphael. And Scrafty, it's not going to want to stare down that Mega Gardevoir. It needs some help from Thundurus.
That it does. Scrafty, not a Pokemon that typically carries Protect or Detect. Instead it has that Fake Out and usually Assault Vest. But Assault Vest is not going to protect you from Hyper Voice from Mega Gardevoir. Very likely we'll see a Protect from Gardevoir here, trying to avoid getting Thunder Waved or Swaggered before it can get an attack off in Scrafty. And this game could come down to dice rolls. The Gardevoir's special defense is pretty strong, so for as far behind as Toler looked and for having to lock Landorus into that superpower that's now reduced its attack and defense by 1 stage, Mega Gardevoir may be able to finish this one off as long as it can get those Hyper Voices off.
Doesn't it just feel right for the tournament to come down to potentially some swagger rolls?
Yeah, we've seen this one before, and one thing that's going to be interesting here too is dealing with Landorus. There isn't a great way to do damage to it, so even though that superpower is not going to do very much damage, Landorus is still a problem, and if it knocks out Scrafty before that swagger can help Scrafty knock out Gardevoir, Thundurus is in trouble.
Yeah, well, Gardevoir is going to protect itself, hoping for Landorus to get some damage off. Smart fake out from Raphael, though, doesn't let Landorus make a move here, fakes it out while Raphael goes for the swagger on Mega Gardevoir. So both players going a little bit conservative. Toler definitely just wanted to make sure that he burnt that fake out, though.
Yeah, that was the right play by Raphael, though. I mean, it's tempting to fake out Gardevoir instead to stop the Hyper Voice, but save some damage on Scrafty. If the swagger works, it'll matter.
Here comes the swagger from Thundurus onto Gardevoir. Gardevoir trying to get off an attack. This is 4th of July weekend. We'll see if it can do it. Superpower from the Landorus onto Scrafty. Of course, not that powerful. Still deals a little bit of good damage onto Scrafty, though. Mega Gardevoir confused. Is it going to happen? No! Gardevoir hits itself in its own confusion. Super Fang from Scrafty onto Landorus. Takes about half of the remaining HP onto Landorus, and now that confusion onto Mega Gardevoir, making sure that Toler could not get any damage off.
Yeah, playing the odds though is Raphael. I was expecting that Super Fang on Gardevoir could have taken it, weakened enough to be knocked out by a Thunderbolt here. Instead, relying on the Thunder Wave and the confusion for Gardevoir not to end this game with Hyper Voice.
Speaking of playing the odds, going to paralyze that Mega Gardevoir again. Another superpower from Landorus, not going to pick up the KO on Scrafty yet. So again, that Scrafty still around, confused, paralyzed. Gardevoir gets the Hyper Voice off. Do you believe in Poke Miracles? Toler Webb gets the Hyper Voice off, takes down the Scrafty, deals damage to that Thundurus, and now Thundurus on the field really needs to get a lot more rolls.
Yeah, a lot of rolls. You know, a single more Hyper Voice from Gardevoir is going to end this game. Unless Landorus chooses to Superpower Thundurus, a little bit of a strange situation here, but actually doesn't want to activate that Citrus Berry potentially. Take an extra turn for Gardevoir if it does.
Another swagger for Raphael onto Landorus. That Choice Banded now fully boosted. Landorus hits the confusion as well. Still around thanks to those superpower drops actually. Gardevoir confused and paralyzed, hits itself again. So Raphael just barely holding on. He wants to take that title back to Canada, but he's going to need a lot more help.
Yeah, we're going to see a few more rolls here, and the clock is also ticking down. If Landorus knocks itself out here, it's actually going to be advantage Raphael with the health remaining. He could be able to win a tie.
All right, it's going to keep happening. Landorus is confused. Superpower from Landorus goes through onto Thundurus. Deals a little bit of damage. Of course, resisted. Will pop the Citrus Berry, though, as Landorus drops its own stats once more. There's that Citrus Berry going to heal Thundurus back up. Probably putting it in a position where it's more healthy than it started. A little close. Thundurus using Thunderbolt onto Gardevoir. Going to deal damage as well. Gardevoir snaps out of confusion. Gets the Hyper Voice up. Is not paralyzed. And Toler Webb takes the national championships in 2-1 fashion. 3 games going down to the wire. The crowd is chanting USA as Toler defends the title here on home soil.
What an amazing victory. It looked for sure like he was going to lose that one for a while in that third game. Both players having an excellent come-from-behind victory in game 2 and 3, but Toler taking that first one and the third one, coming out on top.
Yeah.
Gardevoir able to come through in the clutch there, and it was that close. That swagger from Thundurus almost took the game. A very important difference for the teams with swagger instead of hitting